Los Angeles. Campus protests erupting across the country last spring, a response to Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza after the brutal terrorist attacks on October 7th. Hundreds taken hostage and over 1,000 dead, then tens of thousands killed in Gaza and mass destruction. Closer to home, new questions about free speech, extremism, and foreign influence. Not to mention hundreds of arrests and questions from Congress about some of the groups involved. One drawing scrutiny?
There is nothing wrong with being a member of Hamas.
Samidoun, a pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel advocacy group.
These are the people that are on the front lines defending Palestine and fighting for its liberation.
That's Samidoun co-founder and international coordinator Charlotte Cates, taking part in Resistance 101, a webinar held in March by a student group at Columbia University. Samidoun, which means steadfast in Arabic, is banned in Germany and Israel for its vocal support of designated terror groups.
Most of what we do is kind of the activism that you see people do every day in their communities. So that's organizing demonstrations, that's organizing political education events and seminars.
Kate spoke to us remotely from Vancouver, where she was arrested on hate speech charges for defending Hamas's actions on October 7th at a rally.
October 7th!
Samidoun has co-sponsored several protests in the U.S. over the last year, both on campuses and at major events like the DNC. We wanted to get a better sense of what Cates is saying to college students and protesters. Do you think the Israeli state has a right to exist?
The so-called Israeli state is a settler colony, and it never had a right to exist. There's no such thing as a state's right to exist.
You supported Hamas's actions on October 7th. Is that accurate?
And when we have spoken about October 7th as a brave, heroic operation, that is something that we stand by 100%.
So you look at the events of October 7th not only as something that you support, but you also believe that it was justified.
I think that Palestinians fighting for their liberation is an absolute right.
Throughout our almost 2-hour-long interview, Cates called Israel a colonizer or referenced colonialism more than 40 times, including after several questions about the death of Israeli civilians on October 7th. What do you say to those individuals who were at a concert that did not have a weapon? Was it heroic for that action to take place?
I do think it is heroic that Palestinians broke out of the siege on Gaza. Palestinians have a right to resist, and that what we saw on the 7th of October was a heroic operation designed to achieve the Palestinian people's liberation.
I guess the question is, where does it end? Do two wrongs make a right?
We're not talking about two wrongs. We're talking about a colonizer, and we're talking about a colonized people fighting for freedom.
Cates has said similar things in her speeches and webinars with students.
And they took an action that they understood is necessary in order to make change.
Members of Congress now asking questions about Samidoun's funding.
How we can make sure we are following the money.
Following the money isn't easy. A U.S.-based nonprofit, Alliance for Global Justice, processes donations on Samidoun's behalf, and tax law doesn't require them to report who is giving Samidoun money. The Alliance for Global Justice didn't respond to our request for comment, but Kate says her organization follows all U.S. laws and regulations. In a letter to the Secretary of the Treasury, House lawmakers have asked for reports on 20 organizations involved in campus protests, including Samidoun, looking into where their money comes from. How much money, even if it's just a ballpark, would you say Samidoun has raised or you've raised here in North America?
I mean, we've raised thousands of dollars.
Ultimately, the question here is, where's your money coming from? Where are you really getting your support?
Well, one of the things that's really amazing about standing against genocides is that, like, a lot of people want to see the genocide end. There's sometimes this discourse about like funding of protests that makes it sound as if like having a demonstration requires hundreds of thousands of dollars. No, it just requires like hundreds of people that actually care about a cause.
A cause that led Cates to Iran in August, where she accepted a humanitarian award, drawing even more scrutiny. But she told us she's not funded by nor affiliated with Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah, or any U.S. designated terrorist organization.
Support can be anything from money to services to personnel.
Laura Burns spent 2 decades at the FBI investigating terror groups.
Certainly there's a component of the protest activity that are individuals who simply want peace. But if you look closely at a number of the activities and the organizations that are involved in these protests and encampments, there is a theme of support for Hamas, which is a designated terrorist organization.
Whether that support violates federal law, something called material support, can be difficult to prove, Burns says, without tax reform.
The laws surrounding tax-exempt organizations' reporting requirements should be enhanced to require more transparency and more accountability.
We asked Cates about questions raised by lawmakers that she and her organization are effectively acting on behalf of U.S. designated terrorist groups.
The concept of material support requires that there is a form of material support. You actually have to provide money or weapons or services to that organization. And that's not what's happening here. We're talking about expressing moral and political support.
There are no known criminal investigations in the U.S. involving Cates or Samidoun. In the midst of the Jewish High Holy Days, and as the anniversary of October 7th approaches, tensions are high. There are Jewish student groups around the country saying they worry about a repeat of last spring. Some protest groups say Congress is unfairly portraying their demonstrations as pro-Hamas when they are calling for peace. And universities and cities, caught in the middle, challenge to balance free speech with public safety. As for Cates, she says her organization will continue to speak out.
Essentially, we're seeing a situation where Palestinian lives are considered nameless, expendable, and pointless, and Israeli lives, even if they are literal soldiers engaging in a colonial war, are considered precious and very important.
What do you all see for October 7th this year, or around that time period?
There's many actions and demonstrations being mobilized. We're going to be out in the streets and we're going to be mobilized until this ongoing colonial project comes to an end.
Tom Winter joins us now. Freedom of speech. She can say whatever she wants, right?
That's right.
On the other hand, she calls Hamas's October 7th attack heroic. More than 1,000 people died. And there is a legitimate concern about the people living in Gaza and their plight. But where does Congress stand on all of this?
So there's been a recent development in this. One of the organizations that we talked about, the Alliance for Global Justice, there was a letter that was sent from the chair of the House Ways and Means Committee, Jason Smith, asking the IRS to look into them and ultimately strip them of their nonprofit status. So that's ongoing. They cite some of our previous reporting on both that organization as well as Samidoun. So this is something that is definitely relevant at this time. Whether it ultimately leads to any sort of action or criminal charges, we'll see. And as we noted in the piece, we did reach out to that organization that is processing these payments. So that's kind of where that stands. This all comes, Tom, as the FBI tonight warning about these October 7th protests and wanting people to be vigilant here in the next couple of days.
Yeah. Did I miss this? You said she's in. She Canadian?
She's in Vancouver. That's where she's based. That's where she's living. She was arrested there as part of a rally and a speech that she gave, and potentially facing charges. They can make an arrest. Whether or not they ultimately go through with a criminal process